All right, this is Openstax U.S. History, Chapter 19, Section 4, Change Reflected in Thought and Writing. So there's a lot happening in the Gilded Age in terms of technology, we call it urbanization, and changes with the economy. And all of these new changes ultimately led to changes in both writing and thought. Perhaps the most significant change actually had nothing to do with the US, but rather Charles Darwin, who was a biologist. And Charles Darwin published On the Origins of Species, which more or less put forward the idea of evolution. And really what this did was to challenge maybe what we might call more spiritual, specifically creationism, challenge the role of God, and really sort of challenging these sort of notions about where species come from, why different species of animals are the way that they are. These ideas, went on to influence other ideas. Herbert Spencer took Darwin's ideas and applied them to society. So social Darwinism is Darwin's ideas applied to human societies. This answered questions as to why some people were poor versus rich. And of course, Spencer said, well, it's survival of the fittest. So the idea was that those who were rich were simply just more fit, and this could explain why there were some rich people, some poor people, why there were advanced sophisticated civilizations and why there were less advanced sophisticated civilizations. Darwin, of course, was only talking about animals, but his ideas were essentially hijacked by Spencer and then applied throughout society, and these ideas were very influential. Also challenging sort of this spiritual realm, so to speak, in terms of thought, influenced realism, and realism pretty much sounds kind of like the name. It's a philosophy that is based in reality, that you look more at the real world right in front of you. And realism went on to influence other sort of lines of thought. Pragmatism. Pragmatism stated that essentially something is only true if it is useful. Useful. All right, so pragmatism is much more concerned with finding what works, what's useful. Instrumentalism was the idea that you could reach that through education. Right, so only through education could you find out whether or not something was useful or something wasn't useful. And again, these were not really concerned with the spiritual or other world. In art, the Ashcan school, which was a school of art, also sought to portray the real world. Right? Real world. And so this is a good example, right? Think about Jacob Riis and what Jacob Riis exposed to the American public, right? So that is to create artwork that is very much in line with the real world. Naturalism, another philosophy or idea associated with natural laws. Again, you could call it maybe anti-spiritual. So very much an emphasis on kind of the real and practicality in terms of artwork, literature. You see some works, what we call naturalist works right here. And this was also true of portraying the experiences of, other people in the United States. So for example, Kate Chopin portrayed the very real world challenges for women, right? Not to sugarcoat it. Paul Laurence Dunbar was an African American. He revealed the real situation for African Americans. All of these kind of related to this idea of realism, right? Based in the reality of it. Now, at the time, there were still critics of the United States, and some of this was economic, but it had its imprint or footprint, I guess you could say, in American popular culture. Looking backward, this was a book about a socialist utopia. It was, in fact, both of these were anti-capitalist. They really took to criticizing American society. Edward Bellamy was the author of Looking Backward. It was one of the most widely read books. Progress and Poverty really criticized, the robber barons of the day. So even though there was a very strong sense that, in America you could make it from rags to riches and that hard work and discipline would be that path, and authors like Horatio Alger were incredibly popular, there was also literature and books that were very critical of the reality of Gilded Age American society.